Games I played this year, in order of my own personal enjoyment. I don't think I played more than 3 games that were released in the past 365 days. However, I did step outside of my comfort zone and played a handful that have been on my list for a very long time. That being said, I'll be starting off with a game I am quite comfortable with. Risk of Rain: Survivors of the Void. I put over 200 hours into this game during the peak of its 1.0 release, even going as far as to achievement hunt it, something I only do for games that are either goated or entirely atrocious. Coming off of Repentance, where everything was nerfed into irrelevance and they added like 40 characters with their own grueling gimmicks to make completion as infuriating as possible, Survivors of the Void was a much needed gift from Hoopu Games. With the addition of 2 new, completely unique characters, over 40 items, new enemies, bosses, levels, fucking crazy good music, listen to me. When your drug dealer approaches you with an upgraded version of your favorite product for $15, you don't think about the consequences of your past actions. No, instead you double down, involve those close to you, and give away another 150 hours of your life. There's no filler here, zero bloat, just flat out premium content. This could very well be the peak of the entire series, seeing as how Gearbox recently acquired the IP and Hoopu will no longer be working on the game. It's hard to have a positive outlook on the game's future, but it's even harder to have a negative outlook on how far it's come and where it is now. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Metal Gear is a series I've always appreciated from a distance. I've had many friends sing its praises, and I've seen plenty of content here on YouTube about how ridiculous they can be. My only personal experience with the franchise has been with this game. I pirated a copy of it when I was 13 and couldn't make it past the second boss fight, which means I made it roughly 30 minutes in before succumbing to skill issue. Seeing it on sale for only $7 nearly 10 years later, I knew I had to avenge my pre-dopamine lacking self and finish what I had started. And I'm glad I did. This game really surprised me with how much fun I was having slicing dudes up. It's at its best during the boss fights. They're so well designed and each is unique enough to where you don't know what to expect. Sometimes they feel like puzzles where you're searching for their one weakness, and when you finally find it, you get to go in. None of this 3 hits and then wait for another opening. No, you can fucking wail on people in this game. Sometimes after an attack, sometimes during an attack, sometimes during a goddamn cutscene, and oh my god, the music, the music! It ties in flawlessly with the gameplay, the visuals, the controls, the artwork, all of it mixes together into this perfect harmony, like a roller coaster rising to the top, and when you finally get there,
very good.
The only time I wasn't super engaged was during some of the walking segments, but you know what they say.
Making the mother of all omelets here, Jack. Can't fret over every egg. Not when you're purging.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Counter-Strike is a pretty important game, that much certainly cannot be overstated. It has a very special place in my heart as the game that I'm shit at 90% of the time, but when I get that crazy playoff, it makes all of the anxiety worth it.
Oh my god!
I put hundreds of hours into it this year easily, and it definitely deserved the spot. But you know what? It wouldn't be right. No, for my money, TF2 fucking dominated. No, I didn't play nearly as much of it. No, it still hasn't been updated. Yes, it still has a botting problem. And yes, of course, it is still the best PvP shooter on the market. The thing about TF2 is it checks every possible box on my checklist for a good shooter, even the ones that contradict each other. It can either be the most casual game you've ever seen in your life, or the sweatiest try-hard fest ever conceived. Movement options out the ass? Check. There's an absurd amount of customization and loadout options, many of which make the classes play completely differently, not just from each other, but from themselves. Why walk at enemies to light them on fire when you can fly at them? Is laying stickies down getting boring? Go charge at people with a scimitar. Is Scout's double jump not enough for you? Well, now you have 3. Now you have 5. Are you noticing yourself getting irritated because you keep getting shit on? Go fucking conga, dude. Play rock, paper, scissors. Hop on medic and get praised by your entire team for healing them. In a gaming climate that's filled to the brim with fear of missing out, battle passes, progress bars that require 50 matches to fill a pixel of, daily challenges and timed exclusives, blah blah blah, TF2 stands out by not having any of that while still always giving you something to work on. Maybe your huntsman is rusty, maybe you could use a little rocket jump practice, learn some air control. Spy. There's no penalty for swapping characters or weapons whenever you want, and you can leave the match to find a map you'd rather be playing on. All these things seem so obvious, yet they are sorely lacking from what's available today in my experience. If you're looking for some lighthearted, goofy fun that calls back to the classic Quake style of PvP, you'd be doing yourself a massive disservice to not give TF2 a try, especially if you're like me and hadn't played it since you were a kid. It's worth going back and remembering why it's the king.
We're sending you in deep, so be on your guard. Scanners indicate particularly rich veins of morkite and gold further down. Bring it back, boys.
Deep Rock Galactic. For a long time, this was my game that I played because it passed the time and my friends played it. I liked it well enough, I had fun, but I never really found myself going out of my way to board the drop pod. There's a number of reasons why I think this suddenly changed for me recently. First off, Ghost Ship Games is the dev team you wish was working on your game. The amount of passion and care they have for their game and community is astonishing. To put it into perspective, I played this game about a year after it first came out on Steam, and back then, I had a list of complaints and desired additions in mind. Well, it's been 3 years and I can confidently say that I no longer have any complaints, and my desired additions are now but a patch note from who knows how many updates ago. Another reason is I stopped no-lifing one class and actually promoted the other dwarves. As it turns out, changing the way you experience something adds a lot more replayability and intrigue into the equation. There's so much damn variety, and even though you're doing the same thing over and over again, the challenges you face are never quite the same. You're slowly building up this seemingly bottomless pit of little bits of game knowledge that will become relevant completely randomly. You can be put up against the same problem 30 times and you'll almost certainly tackle it differently every single time. That's not to say all the repetition doesn't grow stale eventually, as with all games built around completing runs like this, you will run out of steam. But the time it takes to get there has been getting longer and longer as the years go by and more content is pumped into this glorious little game. I could go on all day about why I think this game is a masterpiece, but I'd rather create a standalone video for something like that, perhaps in the future.
Come on, guys! Rock and stone to the bone!
Before we get to my number 1, there are a few games I'd like to point out as honorable mentions. These games either just barely didn't make the cut, or I didn't get around to finishing them for one reason or another. Just because they're placed here does not at all mean they're not exceptionally great games. I simply would feel it a disservice to not talk about them at all. Lightning Round. Despite what I said earlier about Repentance, it's still a fantastic expansion and adds some of my favorite content to The Binding of Isaac. It's the perfect final expansion, and despite my grievances, I still had a great time with it. Dead Cells might be the flashiest and most stylish roguelike I've ever played, and it does just about everything right. The controls are tight and responsive, the levels are fun to traverse and speedrun, and the artwork is absolutely phenomenal. Everhood is an incredible indie gem that puts you in an Undertale-esque world filled with extremely memorable characters and boss battles. The writing is incredible, the music even better, and I can't wait to sit down and finish this one. V-Rising takes ideas from many other games like it and puts its own unique spin on it. For example, in every survival crafting game I've ever played, the day-night cycle functions in such a way that makes daytime preferable to nighttime. In V Rising, you burn to death upon making contact with sunlight, making daytime traversal much harder as you must weave between the shadows of the trees and ruins. The combat and progression is very polished, and I'm excited to revisit again with my friends.
There is an old saying in my family, "Thou who art undead art chosen. In thine exodus from the undead asylum maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. When thou ringeth the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know."
Dark Souls Remastered. I've always been interested in the Dark Souls series, but the one thing that's kept me from giving it a shot all these years has been the press surrounding it. All I've ever heard is that they're brutally difficult, and people really enjoy them. I absolutely despise games that are built entirely around making a frustrating experience for the player, and I mistakenly assumed that's what these games were. A hell grind, where fun comes from the satisfaction of beating the seemingly invincible monster. Well, I'm pleased to report to the three of you that have not played this game that this is absolutely not the case, and in fact, Dark Souls is one of the best video games I've ever played. All that soul-crushing difficulty nonsense is entirely blown out of proportion if you simply employ patience and common sense. I would say the entire game is extremely well balanced, and I never felt like I was pit against something that wasn't designed for me to have fun beating. Except for the tightrope walk. Fuck that thing. From start to finish, the world of Lordran sunk its talons into me and refused to let go. It took me 40 hours to beat every boss and finish my playthrough, but it felt like it flew by because of how brilliantly paced it all is. The scaling difficulty, boss fights, secrets, combat, equipment variety, characters, areas, visuals, sound design, all of it impressed me. It was nearly a completely flawless experience, and I cannot think of a single complaint off the top of my head. It even features my favorite method of storytelling, which is to leave it up to the player to discover what's going on rather than shoving it in their face. In fact, you have to go out of your way to learn more about the narrative because of how deeply it's woven into the environment's characters and items. You're not going to find an exposition dump NPC anywhere. You have to actually take in the hints and clues and piece them together to see the full picture. This kind of world building is something that can only be achieved within the video game medium, and it's executed perfectly within Dark Souls. It made me cry, laugh, and most importantly, it was incredibly fun and challenging. When I think of video games, games like the ones on this list are what I think of. And Dark Souls is the perfect culmination of everything I'm looking for when I sit down to play something. 10 out of 10.